Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to Eddie's Encyclopedia of Musicals. My name is Eddie. Today I'm going to talk about fun facts and hidden details or Easter eggs in various musicals. Most of these are connected in some way, but there are some random ones that I wanted to include because they're still fun. The first musical I'm going to talk about is Phantom of the Opera. In Phantom, there is a song called Notes, in which Fairman, one of the managers of the opera house, is gloating about the recent gala's success despite half the cast disappearing. He has a line in this song: "To hell with Gluck and Handel, have a scandal and you're sure to have a hit." Gluck and Handel were some of the most significant composers in the 18th century. Phantom of the Opera takes place in the Palais Garnier, the Parisian opera house, which is where the original novel takes place, but also where the 2004 musical film was shot. The novel, Le Fantôme de l'Opéra, was written by Gaston Leroux, who actually borrowed the blueprints to the opera house from the architect Charles Garnier as part of his research for his writing. Garnier thought he'd never see those blueprints again, but that's a story for another time. Not really. Garnier did get the blueprints back, and I guess all was well. But the point is, the Phantom of the Opera was very specifically written with this particular opera house in mind. The opera house is incredibly ornate. There's literally a room based on the Hall of Mirrors from Versailles, and the whole opera house is covered in marble and gold. You may know this already because you've seen the movie adaptation of the musical starring Gerard Butler and Emmy Rossum. It was filmed in the same opera house, which I just love. But there's a specific detail in that line that I brought up. To hell with Gluck and Handel, have a scandal and you're sure to have a hit. Gluck and Handel were prolific composers in the 1700s, and they each wrote several notable operas. When you walk through the grand front doors of the Palais Garnier, you're confronted with four statues, two of whom are Gluck and Handel. While the lyric may be coincidental because of these two composers' prominence, I think that this is lyricist Charles Hart's nod to the architecture and the ornamentation of the opera house the story is so famously set in. Also, another fun Phantom fact, there is really a lake underneath that opera house, and apparently it is to this day used to train firefighters to swim in the dark. Another fun fact, Gaston Leroux wrote Phantom of the Opera after an incident where the Palais Garnier's chandelier really fell. A fire in the roof of the opera house melted through a wire holding a counterweight for the chandelier, causing a crash that injured several and killed one. Leroux heard about the incident and ran with the idea of a ghost sabotaging the opera. Moving on to another favorite musical of mine, Come From Away is set in Gander, Newfoundland, in Canada. A lot of musicals don't bother with accents, but they are essential in Come From Away, because every actor plays many roles. What's really cool is how some of the accents are used. Specifically, all the Canadians use the same Canadian accent, which makes sense because they're all from Gander. Except one, Janice, the reporter from Port Basque, who has just arrived in Gander that morning. She does not use the same accent as the other Canadians. She uses a slightly different one. You can hear it in how she pronounces her THs. The other Canadians pronounce them like, THs. They say the and there. But she pronounces them like T's and D's. She says there instead of there, for example. There instead of there. I love this detail because it's so minor, but you can really see the dialect coach putting in the work of bringing in not just multiple American and British accents and accents from various ESL speakers into this musical, but also multiple Canadian accents, which is not something you typically get in Broadway musicals. I was bummed when the Janice that I saw on the tour used the exact same accent as the other Canadian characters. Speaking of accents, Sondheim tried his hand at accent writing in some of his shows, such as West Side Story. There are some rhymes in there that only work if you use a Spanish-influenced accent. In I Feel Pretty, you get the lyrics, "Have you seen my good friend Maria, the craziest girl on the block? You'll know her the minute you see her. She's the one that is in an advanced state of shock." Okay, so block and shock rhyme, big deal. But the other lines don't, right? Maria, see her. No, don't rhyme. But what if you're speaking English as a second language and your native language is Spanish? Well, Maria is still going to sound something like Maria, really. But see her is going to sound different. Let's see, H is a really hard sound to make if you don't have it in your native language. Guess what most dialects of Spanish don't have? H. When you need to say a sound you don't have in your native language, you often either replace it with the closest thing or you just delete it. So let's say you delete it. Now you've got Maria and Sear. Maria, Sear. That's closer, but it's still not there. Well, Spanish also doesn't have rhotic vowels. Those are the R-colored vowels like But with a vowel, especially in a one-syllable word like her, you're not going to delete the sound you can't say, because you'd just delete the whole word. So you just change it to the closest sound that you can say. In this case, that's going to be something similar to a schwa or an sound. Probably a little lower than that, specifically because Spanish doesn't have a schwa. A schwa is a central mid-vowel, which means you pronounce it in the middle of your mouth. Spanish does have a central vowel, but it's not a mid-vowel, it's a low vowel. And that vowel is a, the same vowel at the end of Maria. So let's replace with a and delete that H, and let's see what we've got now. Maria, Sia. Maria, Sia. And there we've got a rhyme. Now, you might be thinking, well, Eddie, sure, it rhymes when you say it like that, but I've listened to this song and it isn't pronounced like that. And my rebuttal to you is, listen to the original Broadway album. They do pronounce it like that on that recording. I was so excited when they did. I just imagine Sondheim breathing down those actresses' necks and making sure they got the accent right. But in future productions, the rhyme is in fact lost, because the actresses usually don't use the correct accent. Sweeney Todd has some interesting accent-related things going on, too. Maybe you're familiar with the emphasis on perfect rhymes in a musical theater. Perfect rhymes are those that match exactly from the first stressed syllable of the matching string through the end of the word. So, for example, never and ever. This can work across words, too, which is super cool, and that's a trademark characteristic of Sondheim's lyrics. We get things like armfelt and charmfelt from A Little Night Music, Sweeney planned and Machini planned from Sweeney Todd, and so forth. In order for a rhyme to be perfect, not only do the sounds have to match exactly, but so do the stresses. There are plenty of examples in lyrics where that doesn't happen, and the lyrics feel slightly off because they're imperfect. For example, hit and it from the Prom. Hit is stressed, it is not. For the record, I'm not intending to diss on imperfect rhyming. I think it can be done well, but I think mismatches and stress can make the rhymes feel weird and forced. In Pretty Women, in Sweeney Todd, Sondheim rhymes dancing with glancing and man sing. Do you hear the problem? Sondheim strove to use perfect rhymes in his lyrics, but this is an example of an imperfect rhyme by way of mismatched stress. Say these words out loud. Not sing them, say them. And you'll see what I mean. Dancing, glancing, man sing. It's not man sing, man sing. It doesn't feel awkward in the song, though. Why not? In English, stress tends to be marked by pitch, length, and loudness. The stressed syllable will have the highest pitch, the longest vowel duration, and the highest volume. Pitch, duration, and volume. Music has those. In Pretty Women, Sondheim gets around the problem of stress mismatch by faking stressed syllables. For all three phrases, dancing, glancing, man sing, the final syllable is higher than the one before it, and it's held for longer than it would be in normal speech. For the stressless syllables, this does not feel unnatural because we're used to having syllables with different pitches and durations, and words having different pitch patterns in music than in speech. But having the higher, longer stressless syllables makes them feel stressed. The way all three of these final syllables are sung with the same higher pitch and longer duration makes them all sound like they have the same amount of stress. Thus, Sondheim used music to make an imperfect rhyme sound perfect. Although there is an issue with the accents, not stress, the actual accents, because Sweeney takes place in London, but dancing and glancing don't rhyme with man sing in accents like Cockney, right? Dancing, glancing, man sing. Even Sondheim, with all his attention to detail, could not research accents adequately enough to replicate them in his work. That just goes to show how hard it is to write an accent you don't speak. Anyway, this is not the only interesting use of imperfect rhymes in Sweeney Todd. Sondheim was adamant that perfect rhymes were the only type of rhyme that should be used in the musical theater lyrics. But then he wrote the lyric, "That's what you promised, that was last August." Promised and August don't rhyme. Well, they don't make a perfect rhyme, at least. They are a type of imperfect rhyme. This seems like an egregious error for someone who is so against imperfect rhymes. Could he not find the right word? Was this a rough draft that squeezed into the final version? Nope, I think this was fully intentional. This song is right when Antony has broken Joanna out of Bedlam. She has been going mad in there, and why would she be speaking in clean, perfect rhymes when she's literally going crazy? Sondheim uses this rare, imperfect rhyme to show how much she has been affected by the asylum. As a lyricist myself, I find imperfect rhymes can be really fun to listen to, but this example and the next one I'm going to talk about really demonstrate just how important using perfect rhymes in musical theater can be. If you use perfect rhymes as a rule, you can then break the rule in interesting ways, and the audience will pick up on it. No, they won't say, "Wait, Joanna just used an imperfect rhyme, she's clearly going insane." But they will tacitly know that that rhyme was imperfect, and they will put those pieces together subconsciously. I said there was the next example of Sondheim in imperfect rhymes. There is. In the opening number of Sunday in the Park with George, which is titled the same, Dot has this lyric, "And respect and attention, not to say connection, modeling's no profession. If you want instead, when you're dead, some more public and more permanent expression of affection." Attention, connection, profession, expression, affection. Specifically the way they're sung, attention, connection, profession, and so forth. Some of these are perfect rhymes, and I've had people tell me that Sondheim wasn't rhyming all of these words with each other, just the perfectly rhymed ones. My response to that is, oh yes, he was rhyming all 5 of these words. If he wasn't, he wouldn't have underscored them in the music the way he did. He clearly wanted the audience to notice the similarities in the words, such as the final shun syllable, which gets stressed, in the music. Why did he rhyme these words? Well, an important part of Dot's character arc is that she is teaching herself to read as an adult. She is uneducated at the start of the musical. Why should she speak eloquently? The way Sondheim uses her language allows her to demonstrate that she uses language quote-unquote imperfectly, so to speak. And we see her actively improve over the course of the show. By the end of the musical, she speaks strictly in perfect rhymes. In perfect rhymes. Not imperfect. In perfect. Don't want to mix those up. Like I said, this detail just goes to show how following certain rules can make the breaking of those rules so interesting, in this case for character development. Speaking of Sunday in the Park with George, one of my favorite facts about this show is that it is one of the only 2 musicals in history to both win the Pulitzer Prize for Drama and lose the Tony Award for Best Musical. It lost Best Musical to La Cage aux Folles. The other musical which with such an achievement is Next to Normal, which lost the Tony to Billy Elliot. Moving away from Sondheim, there's another composer-lyricist I would like to talk about, because he is also incredibly detailed in his work. Lin-Manuel Miranda loves throwing references to theater and hip-hop into his musicals. I'll leave the hip-hop references to someone else to break down, but I'll talk about the theater ones. Some of them are super obvious, where he's practically doing an in-text citation. The nod to Cole Porter and Too Darn Hot from the title song of In the Heights comes to mind. And others are more subtle or clever. I like the reference to the Pirates of Penzance in Right Hand Man from Hamilton. Pirates of Penzance by Gilbert and Sullivan is one of the oldest musicals in the history of the genre, and it features a famous patter song called Modern Major General, which starts, "I am the very model of a modern Major General. I've information, vegetable, animal, and mineral." In Hamilton's Right Hand Man, George Washington raps, "Now I'm the model of the modern Major General, the venerated Virginian veteran whose men are all lining up to put me up on a pedestal." So we get the same lyric, although we actually get a more perfect rhyme with general and mineral than general and mineral. Of course, that does depend on the accent. I don't think W.S. Gilbert had a pin-pen merger, which is an accent where the vowels in pin and pen are pronounced the same, but that seems to be an American phenomenon, and Gilbert was decidedly British. So that's a bit of an odd rhyme for him to use, and he really stuck to his guns on that one too. He uses that rhyme 5 times in the song, or something like that, like 5 times. Maybe he figured it would be so fast that people wouldn't notice the imperfection. Speaking of pin-pen mergers, there's a line in the Prom that drives me crazy, because It was clearly written with a pin-pen merger in mind, and it's set in a place that uses the pin-pen merger, which is Indiana. And I've never heard the performance say it right. Between the movie, the Broadway album, and the 2 different productions that I've seen live, no one ever says the line right where they rhyme agenda and Galinda in the Act 1 closer. It annoys me to no end. Anyway, back to Hamilton. There are some references to musicals that you just sit there wondering, was that a reference? Like how Hamilton is only 19 but his mind is older, while Mimi from Rent is 19 but she's old for her age. That one sounds so intentional, but I think I read that it isn't a Rent reference. It's just a happy coincidence, I guess, because Lin-Manuel Miranda is, of course, a huge Jonathan Larson fan. Another one of these happy coincidences is the way that Hamilton and Burr signed their letters. It reeks of a Phantom of the Opera reference, because he also signed off as your obedient servant. But nope, that's how the actual Hamilton and Burr signed their letters in real life. It's just coincidental, but it also makes sense, because they took place in similar eras, so it's not that shocking that letter writing etiquette was similar. But let's get back into actual references, not coincidences. Mary Poppins references are basically Lin-Manuel Miranda's calling card at this point. He uses them in almost everything he writes, including his much more obscure musical Bring It On. Sure, the phrase practically perfect doesn't have to be a reference to Mary Poppins, but it's Lin-Manuel Miranda. You know it is. How fitting that he ended up in the Mary Poppins sequel that I've almost entirely repressed. Another reference from Hamilton is at the end of the song Say No to This. Hamilton has the line, "Nobody needs to know," followed by 4 notes on a violin. This line and those notes reference The Last 5 Years, an off-Broadway musical by Jason Robert Brown. Miranda has called the song Nobody Needs to Know from The Last 5 Years the quintessential cheating song, so of course he threw in a nod to it. But my favorite theater reference in Hamilton is not a musical reference, it's the Macbeth reference. The Scottish play is bad luck to say in the theater, and in Take a Break, Hamilton says the name in a letter he's writing to Angelica. His luck turns immediately, with Say No to This being the next song. But that's not the only interesting thing about the Macbeth reference. Madison is compared to Banquo in Take a Break. I assumed it was because Madison was Jefferson's sidekick, but then I remembered Banquo is Macbeth's friend, not Macduff's. In Macbeth, he's originally buddies with the title character, who later becomes so paranoid of him that he has him killed. Then Banquo's ghost haunts Macbeth. This reference in Hamilton is a nod to Madison's switch from the Federalist Party to the Democratic Republicans, which is not really mentioned in the musical otherwise. Banquo is Macbeth's friend and later his tormentor. Madison was on Hamilton's side, but later switched and supported his enemy. Moving on from Hamilton, there is one more musical I want to talk about in this episode, also for references that it makes to other musicals. I've been foreshadowing this one all episode. The final musical is The Prom. I know a lot of people aren't fans of this one, but hear me out. There's something really cool in the references. The Prom is chock full of musical theater references. Most of them are obvious and well known, at least to your average theater fan, such as the ones about Evita or cell phones in the theater. The stage version has a nod to Carrie, so there's that. But most of these references are just there for a quick laugh or oh, I get that. They don't usually carry a lot of meaning, nothing like that Madison is Banquo reference in Hamilton, right? Well, there is one. Let's go back to the Act 1 finale that I mentioned earlier. Tonight Belongs to Us. It's a fun, upbeat number about our protagonist, Emma, getting ready for the prom, and she and her mentor, Barry, sing about how tonight belongs to her. But by the end of the song, it has taken a dark turn where the homophobic characters that make up the rest of her school co-opt the melody and claim that the night, and the prom, are for them. They sing Tonight Belongs to Us. It's still fun and upbeat with lots of dancing, but the audience is stuck in this stunned silence. So what's the reference? Well, this Act 1 finale is a reference to the Act 1 finale of another musical that I've mentioned in this episode. The first one that I referenced, actually, Cabaret. Cabaret ends its first act with the introduction of the Nazis in a song called Tomorrow Belongs to Me. This song is horrifying because it shows how the Germans are becoming more accepting of the Nazis into their lives. Chad Bigulin, the lyricist of The Prom, mirrors this horror and accuses the town of reflecting the values of the Nazis in his musical. Invoking cabaret through happy dancing teenagers is an interesting choice, but it provides an even darker undertone than to the already grim event the audience is watching unfold. Well, that sums it up for this episode. I hope you enjoyed these fun facts and details hidden in musicals. Until next time on Eddie's Encyclopedia of Musicals.